Hello and welcome to the Aware Show. And I'm so grateful to be here with you all today. And if you want to catch this show on demand, you can always listen to our podcast, which is at anywhere you listen to your podcast, The Aware Show. You can listen to that. Wow, have we been through a lot in Los Angeles? And I am just so grateful for all of the prayers and the intentions that have been sent our way. LA has been through a unprecedented experience, and I've seen both humanity and devastation exist in the same block. So it's been quite an experience. Lynne McTaggart is joining me today, and she has been at the forefront of the intention experiment for decades. She created intention experiments, and that is a perfect thing to talk about today because all of the prayers and intentions, when you send them out, they actually land on an area. And Lynne has written several books, The Power of Eight, The Intention Experiment, which was the main book back in 2008 about intention experiments. And she's done extensive intention experiments around the world for decades. And I'm so grateful. We had you booked before this whole event happened. Thank you so much for being here. Wow. I appreciate it. So, first of all, tell us a little bit about what happens when an intention is sent to an area. What is
Okay,
happening?
well, I have a perfect area to talk to you about, Lisa, which was the last big fire situation in the north of California some years ago when that whole area of Santa Rosa, etc., was on fire. And I run a master class every year, which is a year-long class where I not only teach people about the power of intention and how to do it, but also I put them into small groups of 8 or so and have them meet weekly for the year. So one of the groups had a member whose friend was right in the firing line of the fire. And the fire was coming straight for her house. And so the group did an intention for her to have a kind of dome over her house so that it would be safe, it would be free of any ash, and it would also be a kind of sanctuary for the firemen.
Ah,
Lo and behold, this fire that was coming straight to her went around her house on both sides, avoided the house. She had no soot or anything inside, and it did become the sanctuary for the firemen. It was the one house left standing. It was extraordinary. And when they looked afterward, they saw the fire had created a path that was literally like a dome around her house. It just avoided it on both sides in a semicircle.
how did you know to be so specific? Does that make a difference about the intention, the specificity?
Oh, golly, yes. It's really important. Now, I teach my students all the time that if you're going to have an intention, and let's say you want to heal the big toe of your right foot, you do an intention, or Jane Doe wants to. Our intention is that Jane Doe be immediately, completely, and permanently healed of all pain in the big toe of her right foot and be healthy and well in every way. The more specific you are, in our experience, the more it works. And we've seen this I've run 41 intention experiments now, everything from changing light emissions on leaves to trying to make seeds grow faster to lowering violence in war-torn areas to purifying water and even lowering violence in the most violent city in America, St. Louis, Missouri. And I've done intentions with enemies, Arabs and Israelis. We did one a few years ago,
Yes.
and it was a love fest by the end of it. So I've seen all of these and different kinds of ways using different scientists each time, so we couldn't be accused of bias. And what I have found from that is being specific is really the most important thing to do.
I'm amazed that these are scientifically conducted experiments, and I'd love you to explain that. How do you use the science? What are you measuring? Explain that.
Sure. And we've measured many, many things, and we continue to measure many things. As I say, I've run 41 of them. I've worked with loads of scientists. I've worked with scientists from Princeton. I've worked with a psychologist and doctor from the University of Arizona, Dr. Gary Schwartz. I've worked with the world's expert on water, the late Rustum Roy. I've worked with a very noted professor of statistics, Jessica Utz from the University of California, plus Dr. Konstantin Korotkov, a worldwide noted Russian physicist who've developed equipment to measure all kinds of things, including the state of humans' health. I've worked with scientists in other European universities too. So I wanted to work with different people so we could measure it from different angles. So we have measured, first of all, we started with University of Arizona because they have a laboratory for advances in consciousness and health. And Dr. Schwartz and I first did an experiment just seeing if we could change the light emissions of a leaf. And he used special equipment developed by the late Russian physicist Fritz Albert Popp that could measure light coming out of living things photon by photon and
Wow.
also count them. And so we'd have a clear measurement of that. And he was using special equipment, usually used to photograph faint stars in outer space. He could use this also to measure this light. So we did, and we found the light emissions for that were just huge compared to the other one, the one set intention. We measured the growth of seeds by doing an intention on one group of seeds and having 3 controls, planting them all after 5 days, and then seeing which ones, after a few more days, grew the tallest. And we ran that experiment 6 times. Every single time the seeds sent intention grew significantly higher than controls. We
Now,
did
with the intention specifically to grow taller, I mean, there were specific intentions, right?
no to grow 5 centimeters by the 5th day of growing or something to that effect.
Oh, really
That
specific.
specific. Oh,
Huh.
yeah. Tell the universe what you want. I keep telling everyone. We've done a load of water experiments, including looking at light going through the water, which is a measure of the change of the way the molecules structure together, the H2O molecule structure. We've done things seeing if we could lower pH, if we could raise pH, all kinds of experiments. And we did a live one in Lake Biwa in Japan, the mother lake of Japan, which is highly polluted. And Dr. Masaru Emoto, the famous person who did experiments with frozen crystals of water after they'd had positive or negative intention, invited me to do this experiment some years ago to see if we could clean up the water. And so we took live samples, we measured them, and we measured the pH afterward. And we found that we'd actually moved it to greater alkalinity, at
Wow.
least by a full pH after our intentions. Then we've measured things like violence data. Now, for this, we use Dr. Jessica Utz, professor of statistics, who will also be on hand to measure the upcoming Power of 8 peace intention experiment that we are running for 2025. It's the biggest experiment I've ever done. But for this first one, we've done ones with her with Sri Lanka when it was going through a civil war. We did it with her when we did an intention for the officially most violent place in America, which is a neighborhood of St. Louis, Missouri. And we had her get police data from 2 or 3 years before our intention and then 6 months afterward. And with both of those, we found a huge drop in violence afterward. The war was over, this 25 intractable war in Sri Lanka was over 5 months after our experiment. And it had nothing had been shifting this war. The rebels had taken over the north And right after our experiment, well, during the experiment, the government won a number of decisive battles that turned around the entire course of the war. Now, can we say we did that?
Right. I mean,
Who knows?
how do you really know? But I'd like to think that it is the power of the intention. But how do you really know?
No, that's a great question, Lisa. You don't, but when it happens 10 more times, each time you do an intention for peace, it starts getting interesting. Now, when we did the Sri Lanka experiment, that was such a clean experiment. This was the end of 2017 because we got police data, which is highly accurate for St. Louis as a whole and all the different neighborhoods, Fairground, the one we focused on, and all the neighborhoods around it. And we waited 6 months after our experiment. So we had what Dr. Utz does is a timeline analysis. So she looks at in the past 2 years how it was going up, and in all instances, it was going up from Fairground and all the neighborhoods and St. Louis as a whole, all going up, violent crime. And then she models what would happen if nothing changed. And her modeling was showing violence going way up in Fairground. That's not what happened. It went down by 43% compared to all of the neighborhoods around it where violence continued to go up, and St. Louis as a whole, violent crime continued to go
So it
up.
wasn't any other environment, political, law enforcement, anything. It was all the same. That all stayed status
That
quo.
all say the same. So that starts getting more interesting. Like
Mhm.
maybe we did have this effect. And so what we're going to be doing, I'm running this giant peace intention experiment on February 1st at Gaia. So one of the things we're going to be measuring lots of things, but one of the things we're going to be measuring is, do we have an effect on lowering violence in this target city? And again, we'll get all of the data from before and afterward, and we'll have Jessica model this and see what happened and do all of her complex statistical analysis. So we don't mess around with this. We do serious science when it has to do with it.
Now,
But
you can't tell us the name of the city? No.
I can't tell you the name of the city, and I'll tell you why, Lisa. One time we disclosed the target early, and it messed up the whole experiment because people start thinking about that area right then and there. They
Wow.
start attending early. So we found a very fuzzy start to it. So I never reveal it until the absolute second is going to start.
That is really good news, actually. That's great news that it started to blur the results early because that shows intentions are instantaneous.
Oh, yeah, they start working right away. And although there are times when I do work with individuals, when they're working in smaller groups, power of eight groups, as I've called them, to heal things in their own lives and for group members, it may not happen right away, but it will oftentimes get set into gear. But
So, no, I'm sorry. So having these intentions being given to each other, we can do this on our own. We can start our own Power of Eight group. You wrote an entire book about it. Can you tell us a
absolutely,
little bit about that?
absolutely. So I started these intention experiments in 2007. And as I said, they got more and more and more complex. A year after, when we started getting these amazing results, I decided to shrink this all down and put people in groups of 8 or so and have them send healing intention to a member of the group with a health challenge or some other kind of challenge, financial challenge, career challenge, relationship challenge, even a challenge in their life's purpose.
Hmm.
You know, a lot of people come to work with me because they're sort of saying, okay, now what? I want to change my life, do something more meaningful. How
Hmm.
do I do that? So I was not expecting much to happen, just a kind of feel good effect, like having somebody come up behind you and give you a gentle back rub.
Yes.
That's what I expected the first time we did it in 2008 in Chicago. That's not what happened. People came back the next day, and the people who had had intentions set for them had changed remarkably. One of the women who had walked in limping badly into the workshop was walking normally, and somebody else had depression and said it had lifted, and somebody else had really bad IBS and said her gut was normal that day. And the most amazing one of all, one person said they have cataracts and they're 80% better.
Wow.
So
Wow.
I was stunned by this.
And you still
And
do these groups of 8?
oh, definitely. I do them whenever I'm speaking. I do a master class, as I mentioned before, where I put people into groups and I monitor and coach them for a whole year to
Wow.
see what happens. Now, in all that time, since 2008, I've worked with thousands of people. I've had 3 people get up out of wheelchairs. Somebody this summer, a fourth one, was came in to this conference barely able to walk on 2 crutches. And right after her 10-minute intention, she threw away her crutches and started dancing. No joke. Now, you'll see, for anybody who's interested, Gaia have done a documentary about both the intention experiments and my Power of 8 groups. And for
Great.
that documentary, I wanted to choose 3 of the most extreme examples of people who had been healed with Power of 8 groups. So I chose Lori from my master class from a few years ago, who was going blind. She had retina damage in both eyes and was beginning to not be able to see at all. She couldn't drive anymore. Everything was getting blurrier and blurrier and darker and darker.
Mm-hmm.
Doctors could do nothing for her. Her group did an intention for her, probably a few of them. She has 20/20 vision now. And she's on the documentary explaining all of it and even showing a video of herself when she first got her eyesight back. So we have her. We
Wow.
have Lisa Pickles. Lisa Pickles had genetic liver deformity, a genetic condition where she didn't have a particular enzyme. So her liver couldn't process everything. Her liver was full of fibrosis, scarring. Her spleen was enlarged. And the doctors said there was nothing they could do for her other than a liver transplant. And she was scanned periodically. Her liver was deteriorating, and it looked like that liver transplant was on the cards. She was only a woman in her 40s. So she went and had one Power of 8 group, just one. She felt energy going all through her body, and particularly around her liver area. A few months later, she goes for a scan. She knew in her heart something big had changed. She got the scan back and a letter from 2 liver experts, 2 consultants, as they call them over here in the UK, to say her liver was normal.
How
So,
let's that is, I mean, it tells about the power of consciousness, but let's break this down a little bit.
sure.
What is the difference between, does somebody have to be open to receive this? Are they possibly impacted if they're skeptical? What's the state of mind of the person that is receiving the intention? What does that have to be? Do they have to know about it? Can they not?
They don't have to know about it. That's the
Hmm.
fascinating thing. Lisa was a total novice. She walked into an organization called the Sanctuary, which was a kind of healing group. And I had taught one of the people who runs it how to do a Power of 8 group. And he was just running it that afternoon. She didn't even know what it was and just went in and got healed. I've had situations where total skeptics are healed. I love the story of Luke, who was a young boy who tried to commit suicide at 15 because he broke up with his first serious girlfriend. So he threw himself off a 40-foot structure onto hard ground. He
Oh,
broke every bone in his body. It was
my
terrible.
goodness.
He had nerve damage, brain damage, and his parents wrote me in
Oh,
a hysterical email saying this has happened. Could you please do intentions for Luke? because they were firm believers. So we did, and Luke got out of the hospital in record time. His
Oh,
doctors didn't think he was going to live. He did. He's a normal young man now in his early 20s. But his parents, were firm believers, and they wrote us after every intention we did. We did 3 or 4 of them to show Luke's extraordinary progress. He seemed to respond to every intention. But here's the thing, Luke didn't believe one word of it. Like
huh.
any usual 15-year-old, he thought the ideas that his parents had were pretty stupid.
Mm.
So it doesn't have to be. And I have somebody in my master class who's just finishing up from last year's class who her group did an intention for a builder. And her builder had really bad heart issues. He had clogged arteries. All of them were clogged. He was due for open heart surgery. His doctors had him come in for a scan that was really supposed to be a pre-op scan. And after that intention, they did a few of them, her group. They had a look, and his arteries, I swear to you, were totally clear. Now,
Wow.
this isn't somebody who believed in any
Mm.
way. The person in my class just got permission and said, "Can we just do this for you?" And he said, like anybody, "Yeah, sure." And there it was, a total miracle.
I
But
find this more powerful than therapy because what you're doing is you're constantly saying, I intend for this to happen. I intend for this to happen. Now, what's the difference between intention and prayer? And can you do this with just one person? Do you need eight?
okay, great questions,
Two
Lisa.
questions, sorry.
Okay, well, prayer is much more of a supplication. So you put your hand out to God and you say, "Please, I'd like this. Thy will be done," usually. So it's God, you decide. But with intention, it's a very respectful, but very, and of course, it's secular.
Wait,
So
I'm sorry, you
anybody
cut
can
out. It's a
join.
very respectful, but very what?
Specific and direct intention. But with intention, first of all, you're being very specific and saying, "Hey, this is exactly what I would like, please." And then there's the amplification of a group. People can do intentions alone, and many of my students do. But what I have found over the years is that a group amplifies it. Now, it doesn't need like thousands, millions. It doesn't get amplified even more with more people. That's what a lot of people think. But one of those experiments, the seed experiment I told you about, we ran it 6 different times with 6 different audiences of everything from 100 to many thousands. And the seeds grew exactly the same each time. The seed scent intention grew significantly higher than controls. So more isn't always better,
Hmm.
but a group of just 8 seems to amplify it for numerous reasons. And you asked, why does this work? $64,000 question. But it does work for a number of reasons. Number one, intention works. There's no question. As I say, 41 experiments,
Wow.
37 of them have shown measurable, positive, mostly significant effects, as run by different scientists in different locations with different experiments. So there's no question intention works. And there's other evidence that other scientists have done to show intention works. So there's the power of intention that has been demonstrated to affect everything from single-celled organisms to full-fledged human beings. Secondly, there's the power of the group. When we get together as a group with a common intention,
Hmm.
groups in general amplify things. They give us, as one psychologist called it, a collective effervescence. We all get souped up by a group, much more so than when we're alone. In fact, the evidence is really clear. We need community. We thrive with community in every way. Community protects us against all kinds of ailments, heart disease, stroke, even the common cold. even genetic illnesses can be protected. Those genes might not be expressed, or more likely not to be expressed, if you have close community ties. So community really lifts us up.
I have witnessed that. Absolutely have witnessed that throughout these fires. I mean, there's a community of people up the street from us caught an arsonist. It was the people that caught a guy starting a fire during a 50-mile-an-hour wind. And it was just the police are so spread thin right now, and so is LAFD. But I mean, it was also, alleged, but they were there. The community was there first, and spraying homes and so forth. And so I'm wondering, are we able to do an intention experiment for the people impacted by the fires in LA now here on the show? No matter when this airs, can we do this so that we can specifically intend, all of us listening at any time you're listening, if it's on the podcast or the radio, for what? What would we specifically ask for, Lynn?
Okay, I think we need to specifically ask for number one, the fires to stop. The
Okay.
fires to stop with no more loss of property or life. And I don't know if
No more
any,
fires, for the love. There's nothing else to burn. Oh,
no, I know, but let's do an intention first for the fires to stop.
okay.
And we can also add on to that, and for there to be no loss of life. And what should we do? I mean, people have already lost so much,
Yeah.
but maybe we can intend for the community to come together and
Rebuild.
and rebuild and really successful rebuild and help. As you said, Lisa, something so important. The best of people come out in these disasters. The best of people. Think of people saving other people in a flood. Think of Katrina when that happened and
Right.
people helping. And we've seen it over here. We've had a lot of floods over here in the UK and people jumping in the water to save babies. You know, we see the best of people. I remember with the hurricanes up the East Coast a few years ago when they were in New Jersey, Hurricane Sandy, I think it was called, and New York had no power and everything. And people, some of the shopkeepers were opening their shops and just handing out food and supplies and letting
Mhm.
people reboot their phones and plug and power their phones. And it just brought the best of everybody together in a tough city like New York.
Yes,
So,
it definitely has. And in a tough city like LA, I mean, LA is definitely spread out and very populated. And I think there's also a bigger picture here with the insurance agents, like the entire insurance commission for health insurance and home insurance and every
mhm,
type of insurance. The insurance commissioners need help. They need to change some laws and give more support to the insured and uninsured. Yeah.
mhm.
Yeah.
And to stop uninsuring people.
Yes.
I mean, we've heard about this where a
Mhm.
lot of insurance companies stopped giving insurance to people just months before this happened.
Oh, just a week ago. Yes, a neighbor of mine got a call saying
That's just
your
shocking.
yep, your fire insurance is cut. Just a week ago, saying it would be $10,000 a month to reinsure.
That is so terrible,
Yeah.
unconscionable. And
Yes.
so the people have to come together. So why don't we'll hold a minute,
Okay.
just a minute, because otherwise it's 10 minutes of dead air time.
Yes.
But we'll hold a minute and everybody just can participate in this, and we'll do a kind of double intention here. So let's take a deep inhale, everyone. Take a deep inhale, a deep exhale, a deep inhale, a deep exhale, a deep inhale, a deep exhale. And now, on the inhalation, let's hold this following intention together. Our intention is that the fires in Los Angeles immediately, completely, and permanently be extinguished so that there is no further damage to property, need to evacuate, or injury or loss of life. We also intend that once the fire is completely extinguished, that all of the people in Los Angeles come together to rebuild and help those least fortunate who have lost so much to rebuild their lives and to rebuild insurance and to get further and better aid so that this doesn't happen again. And let's just hold this for 1 minute.
Yes.
And as you're holding it, just see people coming together, rebuilding, rebooting, coming together as a really close-knit community, closer than they've ever been before. See people smiling and laughing again and feeling like there is possibility and there is a future, and that this isn't the worst thing that ever happened. It might even be the best.
And new
Now,
beginnings can occur as well. New beginnings.
absolutely, absolutely. So let go of that intention. Just hold it in your mind as you go about your day to day, and just imagine that it's already come to pass.
And that's what we should be doing with any intention we set, is holding it in our mind, maybe setting an alarm on your phone to re-trigger that intention in your mind and allow it to, as you say, it holds a frequency, right, Lynn? It holds a frequency that reverberates into reality somehow.
Yes. Well, there are two other aspects of this, which is why the group intention experience seems to be so important. The third thing is altruism. One of the odd things about intention experiments and power of eight groups is most of the time it's an altruistic endeavor. Now, with intention experiments of all 41, I've never charged a penny for it. I've never had to. There's only been several where I've had to pay anything for it because I needed to hire big server power in the very early days. When so many people were trying to get on at the same time, you needed big servers then.
Right.
Now you can use all kinds of platforms and not have to worry about that. But back then I did. But it is an altruistic endeavor. You're focusing on trying to improve an area of the world. Or with the Power of Eight group, 7/8 of the time you're intending for another member of the group, not yourself.
Mm.
Now, why is this so important for you? Altruism is truly the world's biggest bulletproof vest. People who do things for other people, this is Stanford University research, live 2/3 longer. People
Really?
who do things for other people live 2/3 longer. If you're
Wow.
ill with something and you help somebody else with the same illness, you're more likely to be healed. It's amazing. People who do things for other people, no matter how small, with an open heart, live longer, healthier, happier lives.
Mm.
Even compared to those who have all the money in the world, all of the best holidays and vacations, all of that, living the dream, their immune systems are nothing like those who live a life of service. Again, studies have compared the two. And that's one other reason why one of the other things we're measuring with this giant February 1st intention experiment for peace is what happens to the participants. Because what I have found, I survey people after all of the experiments. And of course, I've worked with tens of thousands of Power of Eight groups. And I find that intending for someone else is as healing for you as getting it yourself. There's a mirror effect, as I like to call it. And with the surveys I've done for all of these years with intention experiments, people who participate in them, particularly the peace experiments, are 40% of them heal relationships. They're getting along better with estranged partners or parents or children. They are getting along better with bosses and coworkers. About half of them, 50%, say they're more in love with everyone they come in contact with. The quotes and the comments I get during these experiments and afterward are unbelievable. Then there is the fact that about 1/3, a full 1/3, either improve or downright heal some sort of physical condition. Suddenly they don't have pain in their hip.
Even though the intention's not on them.
Even though the intention is not on them.
Mm.
And with Power of Eight groups, as many people have had healings in their life when they were focusing on somebody else than when they got it themselves. I think of Andy, who is also in this documentary, who was getting nowhere, trying to get a new career. She was going through a divorce. Her kids were small. She needed money. Nothing was happening. And she was a very talented young woman with experience running a gift shop, having her own having done coaching and all kinds of things. She was getting nowhere with a new job. So I finally said to her, Andy, get off of yourself. Stop intending for yourself and having the group intend for you. Intend for somebody else. And in her case, I told her to intend for Luke, that young boy who had tried to commit suicide.
Right.
She did that, and literally the next week, she gets a call out of nowhere from somebody she doesn't even know, offering her her dream job. Now,
Oh,
I see that over and over and over again.
get
And she
off
also
yourself.
she ended up with a model divorce too.
Oh,
The lawyers on both sides said, "Could we have a blueprint of what you just did? Because we'd like to use it for our other clients." And it hadn't
wow.
been that model divorce when she started. So I
I
see
find it
that.
fascinating because it really, I mean, how have you changed your view on consciousness over the last 20 years of doing these experiments?
I mean, Lisa, I waded into this area, as a hard-nosed reporter. And I started my first book in this area called The Field, which was published in 2002, believe it or not, um, just from a curiosity as to why things like spiritual healing works. How can you have a thought and send it to someone else and make them better? So I assumed I would pick up something by talking to some scientists in consciousness research about human energy fields or whatever. What I didn't expect was a completely new science unfolding right before me. And that's what happened. And it got me into this. And then I got more interested in whatever unfinished business I had, which was okay, there's a lot of evidence that thoughts are things that affect other things, but how far can we take it?
Right.
And so that skepticism, journalistic skepticism, has never left me, but it has completely changed my view about the world. What
Mm,
I think now,
yeah.
and what I know now watching this, is that we are far greater and grander with far more capacity than we ever understood.
Mm,
And our current scientific story is so limited and materialistic compared to the way the world really works. And what I have seen is we have the capacity to heal ourselves, each other, and the world. There's no question about it. I've seen it thousands of times now. We have the ability to see beyond our senses with remote viewing. We have the ability to forecast things. We have precognitive abilities and so much more. And so the problem is the story. the story is way too old. The story of us being isolated individuals on a lonely planet in a lonely universe is an old vision from the more than 300 years old of isolated and separate things operating according to fixed laws in time and space. We're much more like a bunch of quantum particles with seemingly anarchic behavior, only because they don't fit that old paradigm. But we are far more connected. And one of the things that is most fascinating to me about these Power of Eight groups, and I've measured this, Life University is doing a series of experiments with me to find out why these Power of Eight groups are so healing. Now, the one they've done already was on brainwave activity during Power of Eight groups, and we got 7 groups of student volunteers. Most of them hadn't even meditated before. We put an EEG cap to measure brainwaves on one member of each Power of Eight group, and they did intentions for one member of the group who had pain. So we did that, and what we discovered, to our surprise, particularly to the surprise of Dr. Stephanie Sullivan, the neuroscientist who ran these experiments, was the brainwave signatures looked nothing like those of meditation, which shocked us. We thought we'd get those increase in slower brainwaves, alpha brainwaves. What we did see was a turning off and way down of a numerous brainwaves, particularly the parts of the brain that make us feel separate, who help us navigate through space, saying, this is me, this is not me. Mm-hmm. They were dialed way down. The parietal lobes that sit back here, the temporal lobes that sit right here, and also the right frontal lobes, the part of the brain involved with worry, doubt, negativity. Those were dialed way down. So these brainwave signatures, which look nothing like meditation, looked virtually identical to the work done by Dr. Andrew Newberg from then the University of Pennsylvania, when he measured Sufi masters during chanting and Buddhist monks during ecstatic prayer. So these were the brainwave signatures of people in a state of ecstatic oneness. And that's what people report all the time. And that, I think, Lisa, is the secret sauce, because we don't get to experience life in ecstatic oneness very
Not
much.
very often. And it's very interesting that you make that distinction between meditation and this ecstatic oneness state, because meditation tends to be more passive. And the difference between prayer and intention, prayer tends to be making the onus on a deity or a being rather than on specifically what you want. And there's also a guilt associated with saying, God, I would like $101,000 by this date. I mean, that's not anywhere in any religious scripture. So have you ever determined if an intention experiment doesn't work, have you ever found out why, or is there a common factor as to why it wouldn't work?
The reasons it doesn't work in our intention experiments have been technical issues. So, for instance, we did a really fun intention where we embedded water with our intention and was trying to use that to water seeds to see if they would grow faster. But the problem was the lab assistant working at the University of Arizona had accidentally put these water samples next to an electromagnetic field. And that, we think, zapped out our intention. So those kinds of things happened. There were a few other technical issues that were problematic with the 4 that didn't work. We haven't seen any other that doesn't demonstrate some sort of effect that demonstrates it's positive, and most of them have been significant. I've seen intentions that don't work in my Power of Eight Intention Masterclass. Most of the time when I'm holding clinics and helping people and coaching people through that year-long process, I find they're not being specific enough. They're usually doing things like this. My intention is to win $1 million in the lottery. And I say, okay, is that what you need? well, no, I need $20,539 to buy this new car. And I said, why aren't you intending for that? And or they're not giving it a time frame, or something about it isn't very specific. That's the number one issue. Number two, a lot of people are doing it without the correct mind state or heart state. So it's not a mental thing per se, but there's a lot of focus to it. Unlike meditation, where you're letting go and it's a passive exercise, as you say, this is highly focused. And that's one reason why you see these very different brainwave signatures on these, on the students as we saw them. Now, one of the things we're going to be measuring with this February 1st peace intention experiment we're doing with Gaia is what happens to the participants. Because as I said, there's a mirror effect. We see all of these healings. So we're doing specific experiments to test their immune system markers before and afterward to see if there are changes in their bodies.
I
Because
find
that's
it,
the thing that I record, and I want to see, okay, what is it that's going on here?
yeah. I find this fascinating. And once again, so the Gaia Network, I have, hundreds of shows on the Gaia Network. And if you go to the website, which is lisasinspirations.com, I'm sorry, it's inspirationsongaia.com, inspirationsongaia.com, and it's GAIA. You can look for Lynn's intention experiment happening February 1st. You can be a part of the live one. And I'm not sure if you're going to do a replay of it at all, but there's also a documentary up there talking about the intention experiment. This reminds me, Lynn, of the rain dances that Native American tribes would do, and where they would do a ceremony around rain, and it would often work, and it got to be a very well-known thing. Maybe we could even start to intend for more rain in the southern or the full California region, because it is something that is very needed. It does, and it has existed. Have you ever studied those Native American and other rituals around ceremonial intentions?
Absolutely. And yes, the intentions with things like rain dances and other things have been around in the indigenous cultures for centuries. The only thing that I found that was different was usually there's a shaman, there's a leader, a guru of some sort who leads it all. Whereas power bait groups are more democratic. There is no leader. There might be somebody who is just telling everybody, okay, this is what the focus we're going to have. After everybody has decided, somebody might read out the intention, but it's a democratic process. But we have done many experiments. I even tell people on my website, lynnmctaggart.com, I have some little videos people can see. And on my YouTube channel, they can see videos of how to do an experiment, a do-it-yourself experiment for more water. Now, what we've done with many of my students, some of my masterclass students, I encourage them to run some experiments. So they'll actually go to their local chamber of commerce or government and get data on what the average rainfall for that month is, and then do an intention to increase it, and then measure it afterward, get the information after it. And I had one fabulous group who did this and sent me all of the results. It was this beautiful chart. They'd had much more rain afterward after doing their intention. So I've seen it work in a, in a real life setting in
About
modern times too.
fascinating. What about war-torn areas that have existed like that for hundreds, thousands of years, that have always had conflict, like specifically what's happening in Gaza and Israel and Palestine, everywhere, that area? How can you, what would you intend for an area that has been in that state for a very, very long time?
Well, number one, we did intentions for Gaza and Israel um, right after October 7th of that year, I think of 2023. And interestingly enough, I had about 30,000 people participate in the 3 experiments we did for Gaza. And right after our third one, we asked for an immediate ceasefire and a handover of hostages. That was the one ceasefire that happened at all during the whole war, and the greatest number of hostages handed over. Did we do that? Same question. Who knows? There are many possibilities, a lot of people praying and worrying, and a lot of geopolitical stuff going on, but it was an interesting thing. But here's the really hidden effect of things like Israel Gaza. Now, as you know, we did an experiment in 2017 before Israel Gaza blew up, and we did an intention with cameras placed in 9 locations. 9 of them were in auditoriums filled with Arabs from different Arab cities, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Oman, etc. And the 9th camera was filled with an audience of Israeli Jews. And I had to broker this whole thing because neither side were talking to each other and convince them to do this together, not knowing what was going to happen. And we figured we would do an intention for Jerusalem, which everybody has some sort of skin in the game for. So we did, because there was a lot of violence in one area of Jerusalem. And because it was special equipment, I could call on people from the different cities afterward and just say, hey, how was that for you? And to my astonishment, and the astonishment of everybody there, people started saying to the Jews, started saying to the Arabs, we love you, brothers and sisters. You're our brothers and sisters from the other side. And the Arabs were saying, your God is our God. And there was this big love fest that went on. So for
It was
me,
documented. I remember seeing the film. Hmm.
oh, definitely. And there are pieces of it in the Gaia documentary,
Right.
which, by the way, you can have a look at. It's all free, and it's gaia.com/peace will get you right there to it too.
Okay.
They've got it on a separate web page. But yeah, it was documented, and it was shocking to me until I started studying what happens. And I found evidence from Berkeley, from University of California, Berkeley, showing that when we do something altruistic like that, particularly when you're focused on victims of some sort, essentially it affects a whole system in the body with the vagus nerve, the longest nerve in the body that controls our entire autonomic system. And it seems that people who are involved in some sort of altruistic activity like that, it regulates the vagus nerve so much that it essentially helps you be more sympathetic and connected with people who are not like you. So that to me was the big piece. So there's one thing I think about with intention experiments. Maybe we would end a war, maybe we won't. We have ended Sri Lanka, maybe. And maybe we had some effect on Gaza, although, as you say, it's still going on, it's still a mess, etc. But here's another thing that happens. Think of it this way. So we had with those participants a big change. People have written to me afterward and said, my whole life has changed and become more peaceful since that 2017 experiment. Still, but also, here's what's so interesting. A scientist called Nicholas Christakis from Harvard has done studies and evidence of social networks, that they're infectious. So if you are happy, you're more likely to have happy friends, not because you self-select happy people to be with, but because of the natural spread of happiness. But it also happens with good deeds. If it goes 3 degrees down a social network. So just bear with me on the math here.
Okay.
So if John is nice to Peter, Peter is more likely to be nice to Jim, who's more likely to be nice to Jane. And so it goes on. And
Okay.
it continues to ripple down their social network. So let's do a little math here. So if you have those 30,000 people from, say, Gaza, and they all have 50 friends, you'll end up rippling down a social network of well over 1 million people. If they have 150 friends, another estimate of how many people we all know, you will affect down a social network about 4.5 million people. That's half the population of Israel.
Mm.
If they all have 600 friends, and that is the latest estimate from Columbia University of how many people in our social network, probably through social media, etc., we will affect 18 million people. That is, and then if that keeps going, you're going to talking about affecting everybody in the planet. So that's what I'm most interested in, is that ripple effect of intention experiments. Yes, we might affect the target, and boy, is that cool. But more to the point, we're affecting millions of hearts. And that's where I see the real benefit happening, is we're
That
creating peace another way.
that makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of, if you really look at the exponential growth of the intention experiment, then it can really have a ripple effect. And so that's how one person can make a difference. I love that you said that. I love that we can all start right now, here today, in this moment, with setting intentions for our friends, our neighbors, ourselves, whatever it is we can do, and get groups together and do this together. It's very important. And also watch the Gaia documentary. This is right now on there for free. And the correct website for the Aware Show is the awareshow.com/Lynne, Lynne. You can get right there, and that's where you can get to the documentary and the intention experiment that's happening on February 1st. It's the awareshow.com/Lynne, Lynne. Thank you so much, Lynne McTaggart. You have always been one of my favorite guests, always one of my most popular guests, because you bring hope. You are the living example of hope. So thank you for everything you contribute. So much love. Thank you, Lynne.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Thanks for having me. And it's always a pleasure to be here with you.
You must live a wonderful life because you're always in this great state of altruism. Have a great day. Thanks, Lynne. And
Thanks
again,
so much.
and if you want to listen to this, you can always listen to the Aware Show podcast, and you can go to theawareshow.com/Lynne, Lynne, to watch the documentary and be part of the Peace Intention Experiment. Until next time, I invite you to stay aware.